All right, what's going on, guys? Today I figured I'd upload a quick video to kind of show off the settings that I have for my renders in Vegas Pro 18. And I'm going to be very quick about this, and then I'll kind of go into the explanation of the Smart Upscale filter that I use, as well as the Levels filter that I use so that my videos don't look as dark. So first, we're going to go into the project settings. And I'm just going to show you what my settings are. You can customize these templates yourself. If you're not sure how to do that, I would advise looking at other tutorials. So I'm just going to try to make this as quick as possible. So 4K, 60 frames per second. Here's the settings. You may want to have to, or may want to stop the video, take a screenshot, and just basically do this. And once that's taken care of there, take a look at the audio settings. Okay, and again, once you've done this, you could start all your projects the same way, depending on, what resolutions you usually render out in. You may or may not want to do that. So those are the settings for 4K. Same settings for 2K or 1440p. Right, lower resolution, different name. Once you've customized everything, then I would name it and save it. But don't do that first and then change something, because then it's just going to go back to custom and whatever in between here. So again, just for sake of the tutorial, all the settings are the same. And again, keep in mind, this all depends on your source video file, your recording. You want to have that at the highest quality possible. If that's low quality, everything else is going to be low quality. There's nothing you can do about it. So make sure whatever you're recording is the highest quality possible. So if you have a high bit rate that's above what YouTube recommends, that's okay, because you're going to re-render this out of Vegas anyways at the proper bit rate, so that it'll upload quicker and it will have the least amount of compression possible. So once that's all done, and since I've already done it, you want to make sure this is at best and full. For some reason, this will affect your overall render if you don't have this selected. And then you go over to render as. Now I have some templates already set up, but you can pick typical template that they have already. So again, I would pick Magic's AVC AAC MP4, and obviously go by your frame rate of your original source. If you have an NVIDIA card, pick this afterwards, and then just basically customize the template. Now, once you're done doing that, it's going to show up in this list, and once you find it, you can star it, so it only shows up in your favorites. This way, if you make a bunch of these and make a mistake, you'll only show the ones that you know are working for what you're trying to pull off. Now, what I like to do is not just put the resolution and the frame rate, but afterwards I'll put this, okay, this is what the recording settings in OBS are. This is the best settings for that. So then I'll put this afterwards. So let's say you do OBS variable bit rate, and then you put, like, obviously the number in K would be like the bit rate. Okay. So if you want, do that. That might help you out, so you know exactly what type of settings you have for your source file, and then what you're aiming for. So then once that's done, come up to show favorites only, and then they'll pop up here. And that's just basically that. Obviously name your file, make sure .mp4 is after the file. If you don't do that, it's just going to render out a big file. Once you name it to MP4 after the fact, it might work, but it could also cause problems with the quality of your video. So once that's done, that's basically it. It's that simple. Another thing I want to show everybody, and keep this in mind, is that I'm going to take these all off here. You'll see the viewport, do different things here. So first off, when you render out videos out of Vegas Pro, if you don't use levels, and I'm going to show you the setting I have, computer RGB to studio RGB. If you don't use that, your video is going to be way too dark. Okay, and that's just how it's going to look, because you're using computer RGB color space. And when you play it on a player, it's basically mimicking, like, studio broadcasts or the news or TV. So it's going to use a different color space, so it's going to look a lot darker. What you want to do is convert your video to the proper color space, so when you play it, it looks the way that it's intended. So just keep that in mind. Now, I made a custom version of it because I wanted to change a few parameters. Because when you actually turn this on, you'll notice that this gets a little darker, and then it looks a little hazy, right? So you'll have to mess around with some of the settings. But I set this up because I'm going to do another filter afterwards, and it's going to counteract the haze. and it's going to make it a little bit more brighter than the original. So once I do that, as you can see, it'll be way too bright if I don't have levels, but when I add levels, it kind of brings back a little bit more detail, and it's not still going to be a little bit of a haze, but that's just because it's changing the color space. So once that's done, you're going to start upscaling it. And then after you upscale it, you want to sharpen it a little bit, because even though you upscale it, it's still going to be a little bit blurry. And the whole purpose of smart upscale is basically and essentially, it's taking, like, say, a 1080p video, and it's going to, instead of just stretching that to 4K, it's going to give that 1080p video, you know, the equivalent of 4K video's amount of pixels. Okay, so when it upscales it, it has more pixels to work with detail. It's not going to stretch anything. It's not going to make it look more blurry. It's going to have enough pixels to make it look sharp in the way that it's intended. So it's almost as if you recorded it in 4K. Nothing's ever going to be as good as native 4K or 2K resolution recordings, but you can get very, very close with certain techniques. So that's what this filter does. Now, I know Adobe Premiere, as far as I know, doesn't have this filter. You actually have to use Adobe After Effects to kind of get the same effect as you would in this one program. So I would advise, you know, if you use those other programs, great. But if you want to do just these things in one program, get yourself Vegas Pro. It's going to save you a lot of time. So for 4K, the default here, if you do smart upscale, would be 2. Okay, so let's say I'm going 1080p. That's going to upscale it twice, right? Boom, boom. So that's 2. So for 4K, that's 4. And this right here is the defaults. I don't really have a problem with noise in my recordings because it's just highest quality possible. But let's say you're outside, maybe you're doing some like drone footage, and you upscale and you're noticing that there's noise. Or say you're taking like a standard definition video, you're upscaling it, and there's a lot of noise. You'll have to mess around with this slider. It's kind of a hit or miss. But once you get to the right sweet spot, you know, just save it, name something up here, and then save it. So it's a setting that you'll know what it means. And then after this, you want to go to sharpen. And now I have it 0.050. You may have to go a little higher. You might want to go a little lower, depending on how crisp the video looks. So what I would do is that I would take the original recording, look at it, see how crisp it is, and then look at the one that you render out here. And if it's not as sharp, just kind of mess with the sharpen settings until it looks pretty close. It may not be perfect, but it will look pretty dang close. Heck, you might even make it look better. So that's basically what I do for my videos. I make sure that the project settings match what my output's going to be. I then make sure my render settings match as closely as possible to the original video file I have, but at the same time, they're going to render out the video at a bit rate where YouTube will do the least amount of compression when it's re-encoding it, okay? And keep in mind that 1440p and above will give you the VP9 codec after your video is encoded on YouTube. Anything below that, you're going to get the AVC1 codec, and that's the one that doesn't look as good. For instance, if you're doing quick movement around, like playing Call of Duty or something like that, you're going to notice pixelation, blockiness, you know, artifacts. VP9 will get rid of that to the best of its ability. It's the closest thing right now I think YouTube has to lossless quality. But you also have to keep in mind that it all depends on your source video that you record with. So if that's in the highest quality possible, I usually do it in like 50 Mbps or 60, because I know I'm going to bring it into this program and I'm going to re-render it out. And what's going to happen is that it's going to take as much data as it can in that recording, make your recording look as clear as possible, but it's also going to bring it down to an acceptable size that YouTube will say, okay, this doesn't really need to be compressed. It doesn't need to be messed with. All I have to do is encode it to the new codec, right? And that's what you're trying to do. You don't want compression. Now, it may do it a little bit anyways, but it won't be as bad as if you uploaded, like, say, 135 Mbps video for, you know, 2K 60 frames a second. It's going to be overkill. And then when they finally compress it, it's going to look as if you just didn't care about the quality to begin with. You can use Handbrake, but I would advise against that unless it's like real life video. In certain situations, you may not notice the quality loss, but when it comes to shadows and lighting and like gaming and stuff, you will notice artifacts. So I would try to stay away from that as much as possible. Just encode your videos or render them out as close as possible to the original settings, and you should be fine. So hopefully this has helped you out. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Hit that like button, that subscribe button, share it with your friends, and I will catch you guys later.